On a rain-soaked evening in Cedar Grove, Mike Thompson's old pickup truck came to a halt beside a stranded Mercedes. Despite having just $43 to last the week and 3 kids waiting at home, he didn't hesitate to help. The elegant woman in designer. Clothes seemed out of place in their small town, but Mike didn't care. That's just who he was. Little did he know that this simple act of kindness would trigger a chain of events that would change not only his life, but the entire town forever. The mysterious woman disappeared by morning, but what she left behind would become the talk of Cedar Grove for generations to come. What could a chance encounter on a rainy night possibly lead to that would leave an entire town speechless? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The kitchen table in Mike Thompson's modest home had become a battlefield of sorts, strewn with unpaid bills bearing angry red stamps, his calloused hands still bearing traces of motor oil from the day's work at Pete's auto shop, sorted through. Then methodically, electric bill 3 weeks overdue, property tax notice, final warning, Sophie's school lunch account, negative balance $43. That's what remained in his checking account, and payday was still 4 days away. Mike ran his fingers through his graying hair, the stress of single parenthood etched in the premature lines around his eyes. At 38, he felt twice his age. Dad? Emma's voice drew his attention. His 14-year-old daughter stood in the doorway, already wearing her mother's old apron. I can make dinner tonight. There's still some ground beef in the freezer. Mike's heart swelled with pride and ached simultaneously. Emma had grown up too fast after Sarah's passing 2 years ago. While other teens spent their afternoons at the mall or soccer practice, his daughter was helping with homework, cooking meals, and being a second mother to her siblings. Thanks, sweetheart, but you've done enough today. How about we cook together? From upstairs came the muffled sound of Tyler's video game, punctuated by Sophie's giggles. At least some things remained normal. Mike gathered the bills into a neat stack, tucking them into a worn envelope labeled urgent in his careful handwriting. They joined dozens of others in the shoebox hidden in his closet, a growing archive of his struggles. Dad, Emma hesitated, fidgeting with her apron strings. Mrs. Henderson at the grocery store asked if I wanted a part-time job after school and weekends. I could help with... No. Mike's voice was gentle but firm. Your job is school, Emma. And being a kid, while you still can. She started to protest, but Mike crossed the kitchen and pulled her into a hug. She smelled of strawberry shampoo and graphite pencils, the scent of childhood clinging to someone trying so hard to be grown. I know you want to help. You already do, more than you should have to. But we're going to be okay. I promise. Emma's shoulders relaxed slightly, but Mike caught the doubt in her eyes, the same doubt he saw in his own reflection every morning. Still, he managed to smile. Now, about that ground beef. I'm thinking tacos. As they worked side by side in the kitchen, Mike's mind wandered to the woman from earlier that evening. Her Mercedes had been so out of place on Cedar Grove's humble streets, like a swan among pigeons. The rain had plastered her expensive silk blouse to her shoulders as he'd helped her change the flat tire, but she hadn't complained once. Instead, she'd asked him questions about the town, about his work at the auto shop, listening with genuine interest. Your hands, she'd said, studying his oil-stained fingers as he worked the jack. They tell a story of hard work and care. Those are rare qualities these days. There had been something in her eyes then, a flash of recognition or perhaps decision, but before he could puzzle it out, the tire was changed and she was pressing $100 bill into his palm. Please, she'd insisted when he tried to refuse. Sometimes kindness needs to flow both ways. He'd finally accepted, knowing it would cover Sophie's lunch account and maybe the overdue electric bill. The money was safely tucked away now with his remaining $43, but something about the encounter nagged at him. People like her, wealthy, sophisticated. They passed through Cedar Grove occasionally, usually lost on their way to somewhere more important. They didn't stop. They didn't ask questions, and they certainly didn't look at auto mechanics like they were seeing something valuable. "Dad, the meat's burning." Emma's voice snapped him back to reality. The ground beef was smoking slightly, and Mike quickly stirred it, adding the taco seasoning that was more salt than actual spices. The generic brand was all they could afford these days. "Sorry, just got lost in thought." About the lady with the fancy car, Emma sprinkled shredded cheese into a bowl, the last of it, he noticed. "Tyler said he saw you helping her when he was walking home from school." "Yeah." Mike tasted the meat, adding a splash of water. "She was different. Good different or bad different?" The question hung in the air as footsteps thundered down the stairs. Tyler burst into the kitchen, all gangly limbs and untied shoelaces, with 6-year-old Sophie trailing behind him like a giggling shadow. "Tacos!" Tyler pumped his fist. "Finally! Real food instead of Emma's experiments!" "Hey!" Emma flicked a piece of lettuce at him. "My cooking is getting better." The smoke alarm went off less this time, Sophie added helpfully, climbing onto a kitchen chair. Mike watched his children bicker and laugh, their voices filling the small kitchen with life. The bills could wait. The worry could wait. For now there were tacos to assemble and stories to share around a table that had seen better days, but had never seen better love. "Good different," he said quietly, answering Emma's question. "Definitely. Good different." As they ate, Mike noticed Sophie carefully breaking her taco in half, saving part for later like she always did now. Tyler was doing the same, though less obviously. Even at 10, he understood more than he let on. The kids had adapted to their new normal with a resilience that amazed and humbled Mike. They deserved so much more than broken tacos and second-hand clothes. Maybe that's why the mysterious woman's words kept echoing in his mind. Sometimes kindness needs to flow both ways. In Cedar Grove, kindness was often all people had to give, but tonight, for the first time in a long while, Mike felt something else flowing alongside it. Hope. Small and fragile as a candle flame, but hope nonetheless. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Mike found himself drawn back to his truck. The interior still held a faint trace of unfamiliar perfume. Something elegant and expensive that seemed to mock the vehicle's worn upholstery and coffee-stained floor mats. On the passenger seat lay a forgotten silk scarf, its deep blue fabric shimmering even in the dim glow of the garage's fluorescent light. He picked it up carefully, as if it might dissolve between his fingers. The label read Hermes, a name he'd only heard on those fancy shopping channels Sarah used to watch sometimes, dreaming of a life they couldn't afford. The scarf must have slipped from the woman's shoulders when she'd leaned in to thank him. The encounter played back in his mind, clearer now in the quiet of night. He'd been driving home from Pete's, taking the long way to save gas by coasting downhill, when he'd spotted the Mercedes pulled over on Cedar Grove's main street. The hazard lights had cut through the rain like desperate heartbeats. Any other time he might have driven past. $43 didn't leave much room for good Samaritan acts. But something about the way she stood there, one hand shielding her eyes from the rain, the other clutching a useless umbrella turned inside out by the wind, had made him stop. "Flat tire?" he'd asked, already knowing the answer from the way her in-car listed to one side. "Is it that obvious?" Her laugh had been surprisingly warm, without the condescension he'd expected from someone wearing what probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment. "I'm afraid changing tires wasn't covered in my finishing school curriculum." Up close, she'd been older than he'd first thought, maybe early 50s, with silver threading through her dark hair and laugh lines around her eyes that suggested a life well lived. But it was her gaze that had struck him most. Sharp, assessing, like she was reading more than just his offer of help. "You know," she'd said as he worked the jack, "there's something special about small towns like this. The way everyone knows everyone else's story. The way people still look out for each other." Cedar Grove's got its problems like anywhere else, he'd replied, loosening the lug nuts with practiced efficiency. Oh? Her interest had seemed genuine. What kind of problems? And somehow, as the rain drummed on his back and the evening traffic trickled past, Mike had found himself telling her. About the shuttered storefronts downtown, casualties of the new shopping centre 2 towns over, about the community centre that had closed last month, leaving the kids with nowhere to go after school, about Pete's auto shop struggling to compete with the big chain retailers, but we get by, he'd finished, tightening the last nut on the spare tire. People here, they help each other out. Maybe not with money, but with time, with kindness. And you, she'd asked softly, who helps you, Mr. Thompson? The question had caught him off guard. He couldn't remember telling her his name. Now, running. The silk scarf through his fingers in his quiet garage. That moment felt significant somehow. Like a thread pulled loose from a carefully woven fabric, she'd pressed the $100 bill into his hand, despite his protests. But there had been something else too. A business card, he remembered suddenly. Where had he put it? He patted. His pockets found nothing. It must have fallen out in the rain. The scarf held no answers, just that lingering scent of expensive perfume and a tag that probably cost more than his weekly grocery budget. He should try to return it, he thought. But she'd driven off without leaving a name or number, just that lost business card and the $100 bill that felt like both salvation and burden in his wallet. A car passed on the street outside, its headlights sweeping across the garage walls. For a moment, the light caught the scarf's fabric, revealing an intricate pattern he hadn't noticed before. Tiny keys interwoven with what looked like compass roses, as if suggesting both lock and liberation, prison and pathway. Mike draped the scarf over his truck's rearview mirror, where it hung like a flag of surrender to the strangeness of the evening. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd ask around town. Someone must have seen where the Mercedes went. Cedar Grove wasn't big enough to hide secrets for long, but even as he thought it, a small voice in the back of his mind wondered if that was really true. After all, everyone knew everyone in Cedar Grove, which made the woman's apparent knowledge of him all the more unsettling. Who helps you, Mr. Thompson? The question echoed in his memory, carrying with it a weight he couldn't quite understand. The garage felt suddenly too quiet, too full of questions without answers. Mike hit the lights and headed back inside, leaving the silk scarf to shimmer in the darkness like a promise, or perhaps a warning. The Cedar Grove Gazette hadn't printed an extra edition in 15 years, not since the high school basketball team made it to state finals, but there it was on Mike's front porch the next morning, the ink still fresh enough to smudge. Anonymous donor sparks hope in Cedar Grove. Mike nearly tripped over it while retrieving the regular morning paper. The kids were still asleep, the house quiet except for the ancient coffee maker's gurgling. He picked up both papers, breath-catching as he read the headline again. The article itself was written in Betty Martinez's characteristically breathless style. Cedar Grove awakened this morning to what can only be described as a miracle. Anonymous donations appeared overnight at multiple locations throughout our struggling town. The community center received a certified check covering 6 months of operating costs and essential repairs. Pete's auto shop found an envelope containing funds earmarked for new diagnostic equipment. The elementary school's lunch program deficit was mysteriously cleared, with enough surplus to provide free lunches for the remainder of the year. Mike's hands trembled slightly. Sophie's lunch account, the money he'd planned to pay with the $100 bill, had already been taken care of. But how? He hadn't told the mysterious woman about that specific problem. The phone rang, startling him so badly he sloshed coffee onto the paper. "Mike, tell me you've seen it." Pete's voice crackled with excitement. "Someone left $50,000 in my office last night." $50,000. The envelope just said, "For diagnostic, equipment and training." I thought it was a joke until the bank confirmed the check was real. That's amazing, Pete." Mike sank into a kitchen chair. "Any idea who?" "Not a clue. But get this, I'm not the only one. The community center, the school, even old Mrs. Henderson's grocery store. Everyone's talking about it. Betty's been running around town since dawn, interviewing people for the paper. Through the phone, Mike heard the familiar squeak of Pete's office chair. Thing is, the security camera caught something weird. A woman in fancy clothes looking through our window around midnight. I couldn't see her face clearly, but she was wearing this designer scarf. Mike's eyes shot to his truck, visible through the kitchen window. The blue silk scarf still hung from the rearview mirror, catching the early morning light. "Listen, Pete, I should—" "Dad!" Emma stood in the doorway, clutching her phone. "Have you seen social media? Everyone's posting about some mysterious donations. Sophie's friend Madison says their lunch accounts all got filled up overnight." Tyler thundered down the stairs, waving his tablet. "The community center's reopening. Can we go check it out after school? They're saying there's going to be new computers and everything." Mike held up his hands, trying to process it all. The extra edition of the Gazette lay spread across his kitchen table, its headlines screaming prosperity in a town that had grown used to decline. Pete was still talking about security footage. Emma was scrolling through social media updates, and Tyler was bouncing with excitement about computers. Only Sophie, padding into the kitchen in her unicorn pajamas, seemed unaffected by the morning's chaos. She climbed onto Mike's lap, peering at the newspaper with sleepy curiosity. "Look," she pointed to a smaller headline. "Anonymous Angel brings Christmas early to Cedar Grove." "Angel," Mike murmured, thinking of silk scarves and $100 bills and questions that cut straight to the heart. "Who helps you, Mr. Thompson?" The morning sun streamed through his kitchen window, illuminating the coffee stains on the extra edition. Somewhere in town, Betty Martinez was probably writing another article, trying to make sense of it all. But Mike had a feeling the real story was just beginning. He glanced again at his truck, at the scarf that seemed to glow with its own inner light. The woman's perfume had faded from his memory, but her words remained clear. Sometimes kindness needs to flow both ways. "Dad?" Emma's voice cut through his thoughts. "Are you okay? You look kind of pale." Mike looked at his children. Emma with her two old eyes, Tyler vibrating with renewed hope, Sophie content in his lap, and managed a smile. "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm okay. I think we're all going to be okay." But even as he said it, he wondered what price this mysterious kindness might carry. In his experience, miracles usually came with strings attached. The question was, what kind of strings were these, and who was really pulling them? Emma Thompson sat cross-legged on her bed, a purple journal open in her lap. Mom had given it to her 2 years ago, just before. The pages were mostly filled now, each entry a letter to her mother that would never be read. "Dear Mom," she wrote, her pen hovering over the page. "Something weird is happening in Cedar Grove. Good weird, I think, but still weird. Remember how you always said angels walk among us? Tyler thinks that's what this mysterious woman is, an angel. But I'm not sure angels wear Hermes scarves." I had to Google how to spell that. She paused, listening to the sounds of Tyler and Sophie playing in the backyard. Their laughter floated up through her open window, a sound that had become rare lately. "Dad's different today. He keeps looking at this fancy scarf in his truck like it might disappear if he takes his eyes off it. I caught him making lists this morning. All the bills he needs to pay, I think. But his shoulders looked lighter somehow, like maybe he doesn't have to carry everything alone anymore." Sophie drew a picture at school today of our family. She added a figure in blue that she says is our new friend. When I asked her about it, she just smiled, that secret smile she gets sometimes, the one that makes her look like you. Tyler's talking about computers again. He used to do that all the time, remember? Before we had to cancel the internet at home. Now he can't stop planning what he'll do at the community center. He wants to learn coding. Dad's trying not to get his hopes up, but I saw him looking at programming books online. A thump from downstairs interrupted her writing. Emma closed the journal and crept to the top of the stairs. She could hear her father on the phone, his voice tight with emotion. "Yes, I understand this is unusual, but the bank confirmed it's legitimate." "No, I don't know the source." "Yes, all the other businesses received similar." "I appreciate your concern, but—" Emma slipped back to her room, picking up her pen again. "Some people in town think it's suspicious, all this sudden money. Mrs. Henderson at the grocery store says we should be careful. Nothing comes for free, she told me when I was buying milk earlier. But she was smiling when she said it because her store got help too, enough to fix the freezers that have been broken since forever. I wish you were here, Mom. You'd know what to make of all this. You always knew how to read people, how to see the good without being naive. Dad tries, but he second-guesses himself a lot since you've been gone. Remember how you used to say that magic isn't always about wands and spells? Sometimes it's just about the right person doing the right thing at the right time. Maybe that's what this is. Maybe sometimes the world just decides to be kind." The sound of the back door slamming echoed through the house, followed by Sophie's voice calling for a Band-Aid. Emma sighed, closing her journal. "I have to go, Mom. Sophie probably tried to catch bugs again and got scratched by the bushes. Tyler's supposed to watch her, but he gets distracted reading about computers on Dad's phone, now that we can use data again. I love you. I miss you. And I think maybe you sent this angel lady to us. Because that's the kind of thing you would do, isn't it? Find a way to take care of us even now." Emma tucked the journal under her pillow and headed downstairs. In the kitchen, Sophie sat on the counter while Dad carefully applied a Wonder Woman Band-Aid to her knee. Tyler hovered nearby, explaining earnestly how he'd only looked away for a second. "I was reading about Python programming," he said. "Did you know you can make games with it? Real games. And the community center's going to have classes after we discuss the rules about watching your sister," Dad interrupted, but his voice was gentle. He looked up as Emma entered, and for the first time in a long while his smile reached his eyes. Sophie hopped down from the counter, her injury forgotten. "Emmy, will you help me draw another picture? I want to make one for the angel lady when she comes back." "When?" Emma asked, catching her father's gaze. Sophie nodded solemnly. "She's not done yet. I saw it in my dream." Dad turned away quickly, but not before Emma caught the shine in his eyes. She understood. Sometimes hope was harder to handle than hardship. It made you vulnerable in a way that survival mode didn't. But maybe that was okay. Maybe being vulnerable was part of being alive. The Old Town map hung in Mayor Wilson's office, its yellowed edges curling beneath the glass frame. Red pins now dotted its surface, each marking a location touched by the mysterious benefactor. Standing before it, Mike felt like he was looking at a connect-the-dots puzzle that almost, but not quite, revealed a pattern. 17 locations in 3 days, Mayor Wilson said, adding another pin to mark the library's newly funded children's wing. All strategic, all addressing long-standing needs. Whoever this woman is, she did her homework. Mike studied the pattern of pins. The community center sat at the heart, surrounded by concentric circles of aid. Pete's auto shop, the elementary school, Mrs. Henderson's grocery store, the library, the senior center, even the rundown park where kids still played despite the broken equipment. "Look at this." The mayor pulled out a folder. Each donation came with specific instructions. The community center's funds aren't just for repairs. They're for after-school programs, job training, senior activities. Pete's getting not just equipment, but scholarships for local kids interested in automotive careers. The mayor's desk was cluttered with similar folders, each bearing the name of a recipient. Mike caught glimpses of detailed plans, budgets, timelines. This was no scattered act of charity. It was a carefully orchestrated revival. "And there's more," Mayor Wilson continued, spreading out documents. "The old Miller factory, someone's negotiating to reopen it. Not for manufacturing there. Talking about converting it into a technical training center. Living wage jobs, Mike. Real opportunities." The factory had been Cedar Grove's heart once, before overseas competition shut it down 15 years ago. Its vacant windows had watched over the town's slow decline like hollow eyes. But why? Mike asked, voicing the question that had haunted him since finding that first extra edition of the Gazette. Why Cedar Grove? The mayor's response was interrupted by a commotion outside. Through the window, they watched a truck deliver new playground equipment to the park. Children gathered to watch, their excitement visible even from a distance. Among them, Mike spotted Tyler helping Sophie climb onto a safety barrier for a better view. Maybe that's why, the mayor said softly. Look at their faces, Mike. When was the last time you saw that much hope in Cedar Grove? The playground installation had drawn a crowd. Parents stood in clusters, pointing and discussing. Mrs. Henderson had brought cookies from her store. Pete was there too, talking animatedly with a group of teenagers about something that had them all nodding eagerly. Mike's hand went to his pocket, where he'd taken to carrying the silk scarf. He'd meant to turn it into the police as evidence, but something held him back. It felt more like a talisman now, a tangible reminder that he hadn't imagined any of this. The police find anything on those security cameras? He asked. The mayor shook his head. Just glimpses. A woman in elegant clothes, a blue scarf, no clear shots of her face. It's like she knew exactly where the cameras were. And the money? All legal. We've had it checked and double-checked. The banks confirmed. Every donation came from legitimate accounts, though they're bound by privacy laws from saying more. A cheer went up from the park as the first piece of playground equipment was secured in place. Mike watched Sophie clap her hands in delight while Tyler excitedly explained something to his friends, probably relating the new playground to his dreams of computer programming. The mayor picked up another folder. You know what's really interesting? These plans, they're interconnected. The Technical Training Center will partner with the Community Center. Pete's automotive program will offer internships. The library's new wing will host STEM classes. It's like someone's weaving a net, Mike finished, making sure no one falls through the cracks. They stood in silence, watching the community gather below. Someone had brought coffee and donuts. Betty Martinez was there with her camera, documenting what would surely be tomorrow's front-page story. The scene looked almost staged in its perfection, a snapshot of small-town America coming back to life. But underneath the joy, questions still nagged at Mike. The mystery woman hadn't just known about Cedar Grove's problems, she'd understood them intimately. The kind of understanding that usually only came from living in a place, feeling its pulse, knowing its people. Who helps you, Mr. Thompson? The question echoed again in his memory as he watched his children play below. The map behind him was a constellation of red pins, each marking a point where despair had been replaced with possibility. But what shape would it all take when the pattern was finally complete? And more importantly, what would it cost? Betty Martinez hunched over the library's computer, her reading glasses perched precariously on her nose. 20 browser tabs competed for space on the screen, each containing a similar story. Small towns transformed by mysterious benefactors, struggling communities lifted by anonymous donations. Look at this, she waved Mike over to her station. Millbrook, Ohio, Sunset Valley, Oregon, Pine Ridge, Montana, all in the last 5 years, all following the same pattern. Mike leaned in, scanning the headlines. The details were eerily familiar. Strategic donations, comprehensive community development, careful attention to local needs. But the similarities ended there. No mention of a woman in designer clothes, no blue silk scarves left behind. Could be copycat acts, he suggested. Good news travels fast. Betty shook her head, pulling up another search result. I don't think so. The timing's too perfect, the method's too similar. And there's this, she clicked on an image. A grainy security camera photo from Pine Ridge showing a figure in elegant clothes examining a storefront. The image was too blurry to make out a face, but something about the posture, the way the woman stood. Same person? Betty asked. Mike's hand went to the scarf in his pocket. Maybe. But why? What's the connection between these towns? That's the interesting part. Betty opened a spreadsheet she'd created. I've been mapping demographics, economic indicators, community profiles. These towns aren't random choices. They all share certain characteristics: population under 10,000, recent economic downturn, strong community ties despite financial struggles, key infrastructure still intact, but at risk. She pulled up Cedar Grove's profile. The parallels were undeniable. It's like she's working from a playbook, Betty continued. Find towns with good bones but bad breaks. Towns where a strategic investment could trigger a cascade of positive changes, like dominoes, Mike murmured, thinking of the red pins on Mayor Wilson's map. Exactly, but here's what I can't figure out. There's no paper trail, no foundation. Taking credit, no wealthy philanthropist building a legacy, just results and rumors and... Betty stopped abruptly, staring at her screen. Oh, what? I just got an email. Anonymous sender. She adjusted her glasses. It says, "Dear Ms. Martinez, your instincts are good, but you're looking in the wrong direction. The story isn't about who I am. It's about who you could become. P.S. Check the Mitchell Building records from 1992. Mike felt a chill. The Mitchell Building, Cedar Grove's first factory closed decades ago, had been the town's original economic heart. The mayor hadn't mentioned it in their discussion of the Miller factory plans. Betty was already pulling up the archives. Mitchell Building, 1992. Here, there was a fire. Insurance paid out, but the owners... Wait. She squinted at the screen. The ownership records are odd. The building was sold just before the fire, but the buyer's name is... It's like it's been redacted. Can you tell anything about the buyer? Just that it was a corporation based in... Betty's voice faltered. Based in the same city where our mystery woman's Mercedes is registered. I ran the plates yesterday. They're registered to a shell company in Hartford, Connecticut. Mike thought of the woman's questions about Cedar Grove, her apparent knowledge of the town's problems. Had she been watching them all along? Planning this intervention for years? There's more, Betty said, scrolling through records. The Mitchell Building site, it's one of the few prime locations in town not marked for development in the new technical training center plans. It's just skipped over, like someone's deliberately avoiding it. The library's overhead lights flickered, making the computer screen momentarily brighten. In that flash, Mike caught a reflection in the monitor, a figure standing in the stacks behind them. But when he turned, there was only empty space between the shelves. Betty, he said slowly, how many other towns like Cedar Grove had old factories with suspicious fires? She typed rapidly, cross-referencing her data. I'd have to verify, but preliminary search suggests all of them. Every single town on my list. And the timing. When did their mysterious benefactor appear? Usually about 30 years after their economic downturn began. Betty's fingers went still on the keyboard. 30 years. Just like... Cedar Grove, Mike finished. 30 years after the Mitchell Building fire. They sat in silence, the computer's hum suddenly loud in the quiet library. Outside, children played on the new playground equipment. The community center's lights were, on its parking lot, full for the first evening computer class. Progress and mystery, hope and suspicion, all tangled together like threads in a tapestry. Or perhaps, Mike thought, touching the silk scarf in his pocket, like the intricate pattern of keys and compass roses that pointed toward both locks and liberation. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, hand-delivered to Pete's auto shop. Mike found it propped against his toolbox, his name written in elegant script that seemed out of place among the grease stains and diagnostic reports. Inside was a letter on heavy cream-colored paper. Dear Mr. Thompson, in light of your extensive experience and demonstrated commitment to both technical excellence and community service, we would like to offer you the position of head instructor at the Cedar Grove Technical Training Center's Automotive Division. The position includes a competitive salary of $75,000 annually, full benefits, and educational assistance for your children. Your role would involve not only teaching, but helping to shape the future of technical education in Cedar Grove. We believe your unique combination of practical knowledge and natural mentorship abilities makes you ideal for this position. Mike had to sit down, the letter trembling in his hands. The salary was more than double what he made at Pete's. The benefits alone would change everything for his family. I already told them yes for you. Pete's voice came from the doorway. His old friend's eyes were bright, with unshed tears. They approached me last week about partnering with the training center, asked who I'd recommend to lead the program. There was only one name on my list. Pete, I can't leave you. Leave. Me. Who said anything about leaving? Pete grinned. I'm expanding, remember? New diagnostic equipment, apprenticeship program. The training center's just part of it. You'll still be here, just doing more, being more. Mike looked around the shop where he'd worked for 15 years. The familiar tools, the smell of oil, and rubber, the wall of photos showing satisfied customers with their repaired vehicles. It was comfortable, safe. The thought of change, even positive change, made his chest tight. I don't know if I'm qualified to— Dad! Tyler burst through the door, waving a paper. I got in, the community center's coding class. They said I can start next week and— He stopped, noticing the atmosphere. What's wrong? Mike held up the letter. Nothing's wrong, buddy. Just big changes coming. Tyler's eyes widened as he read over Mike's shoulder. You're going to be a teacher, like a real teacher. Maybe. I haven't decided. You have to. Tyler's face was alight with excitement. We could both be learning computers. Well, different kinds of computers, but still. And maybe you could help me with the car repair merit badge for Scouts, but like officially now. Mike felt something shift inside his chest. Seeing his own potential through his son's eyes made it feel less frightening, more like an adventure they could share. The position starts in 3 weeks, Pete said quietly. Plenty of time to train your replacement here and set up your new. In classroom, they're converting the old Wilson warehouse. You know, the one next to the community center. Mike nodded. He'd driven past it yesterday. Construction crews were already at work, transforming the abandoned building into something new, like the town itself, like his life. Everything was changing. He thought of the mysterious woman again. Had she seen this in him that rainy night? This potential for more. There's something else, Pete added, pulling another envelope from his pocket. This came with the job offer. It's for Emma. The second envelope contained a glossy brochure for a summer STEM program for high school students, along with a fully funded scholarship offer. The program would teach everything from robotics to environmental science. At the bottom was a handwritten note for the young lady who's ready to be a student again instead of a surrogate parent. Mike's vision blurred. The woman hadn't just seen his potential. She'd seen his daughter's sacrifice, his son's dreams, his family's needs. So, Tyler was practically bouncing. Are you going to do it? Can I tell Sophie you're going to be a teacher? Can I tell my friends? Pete laid a hand on Mike's shoulder. The only person who doesn't believe you can do this is you, Mike. The rest of us, we've known it for years. Mike looked at the job offer again, at the salary that would mean no more counting pennies, at the benefits that would let Emma focus on being a teenager, at the opportunity to help other kids like Tyler explore their passions. Sometimes kindness needs to flow both ways. Yes, he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. Yes to all of it. Tyler whooped and ran out, presumably to spread the news. Pete squeezed Mike's shoulder once more before heading back to the front of the shop, leaving Mike alone with the letter that would change everything. He reached for his phone to call Emma, then stopped. This news deserved to be delivered in person. His daughter had carried so much for so long, it was time to tell her she could set that burden down. The box had been in the library's archives for decades, unmarked except for Mitchell Building, 1992, scrawled in fading ink. Betty Martinez set it on the research table with a cloud of dust, her earlier excitement now tinged with caution. Found. This in the back corner, she said. It wasn't in the computer catalogue. Mike lifted the lid carefully. Inside, beneath a layer of yellowed newspapers, lay a photograph that made his breath catch. The image showed the Mitchell building in its prime. Workers gathered on the front steps for what looked like a company celebration. But it was one figure in particular that drew his eye. A young girl, maybe 12, standing beside a distinguished-looking man in a suit. "That's her," he said quietly. 30 years younger, but that's her. Same way of standing, same... He trailed off, noticing the inscription on the back. Elizabeth Mitchell with father, Robert Mitchell, Company Founders Day, 1992. Betty leaned in, adjusting her glasses. Elizabeth Mitchell, the owner's daughter? Look at the date, Mike pointed. This was taken 3 weeks before the fire. They spread more contents from the box across the table, newspaper clippings, company newsletters, photographs. A story began to emerge, not just of a factory's demise, but of a family's tragedy. Here, Betty held up a clipping. Robert Mitchell died in the fire. He'd gone back in to get... Her voice faltered. To get the payroll records. He was trying to ensure his workers would receive their final wages. Another photograph showed the aftermath, the building a blackened shell, and in the foreground, that same young girl being led away by social services. Her face was turned from the camera, but her posture spoke of devastation. The insurance investigation was inconclusive. Betty continued, scanning another article. But there were rumors about sabotage. A competing company had been trying to force a buyout. They wanted the land for a shopping center, Mike finished, like the one that killed our downtown stores. He picked up the original photograph, again studying Elizabeth Mitchell's young face. She lost everything that night, her father, her inheritance, her home. And now she's back, Betty said softly. But why wait 30 years? Mike's fingers found the silk scarf in his pocket. Maybe it took that long to get the resources, to build the power needed to make real change, or to navigate the legal barriers. Betty pulled out her notebook. Think about it. She couldn't act directly after the fire. She was a minor, probably tied up in custody battles and insurance investigations. By the time she came of age, the property would have been tied up in corporate red tape. So she waited, Mike said, planned, built a fortune of her own, and then she started fixing broken towns, like someone once tried to break hers. Betty's reporter instincts were fully engaged now. But why help the other towns? Why not just focus on Cedar Grove? Mike thought about the pattern on the silk scarf, keys and compass roses. Maybe because she learned that healing your own wounds sometimes means helping others heal theirs. A new clipping caught his eye, a small article about local families affected by the factory closure. In the background of one photo, barely visible, was his own father standing in line at a job fair. The sight hit him like a physical blow. We're all connected, he murmured. The Mitchell building's closure didn't just affect one family. It rippled through the whole town, through generations. Like her help is rippling now, Betty added, but in the opposite direction. The library's afternoon light slanted through dusty windows, illuminating the scattered documents. Each piece told part of a story, not just of loss and revenge, but of transformation and hope. Mike gathered the materials carefully. We can't publish this yet. Betty nodded, understanding. She's not done. Publishing now might interfere with whatever she's still planning. Not just that. Mike held up the childhood photo. This is her story to tell when she's ready. We owe her that much. As they repacked the box, Mike noticed one last item, a faded business card from the Mitchell building. On the back, in childish handwriting, was a quote, "Daddy says a business isn't just about making money. It's about making life better for people." He thought of his own children, Emma's renewed chance at a normal teenage life, Tyler's coding classes, Sophie's restored lunch account. Small changes that added up to something profound. She's not just fixing the town, he realized. She's fulfilling her father's legacy and helping us fulfill ours. The box went back into the archives, its secrets safe for now, but its revelations lingered, casting both the past and future in a new light. Elizabeth Mitchell wasn't just a mysterious benefactor. She was a daughter of Cedar Grove, coming home to heal old wounds and prevent new ones. The question was, what would she do next? The town hall's ancient overhead fans stirred the humid air as Mayor Wilson called the emergency meeting to order. Every seat was filled, with people standing along the walls and spilling out into the hallway. The clerk's minutes would later describe it as the largest turnout in Cedar Grove's history. "I know there are concerns," the mayor began, his voice carrying over the murmur of the crowd. "Changes, even positive ones, can be unsettling." From his seat in the middle row, Mike watched faces in the crowd. Some nodded eagerly, others frowned, with suspicion. The divide in the room was almost physical, hope on one side, fear on the other. Frank Davidson, owner of the struggling hardware store, stood first. "Unsettling. These aren't just changes, they're a takeover. Some mysterious outsider throwing money around, buying up property through shell companies. How do we know this isn't some corporate scheme?" "Frank," Pete interrupted from 2 rows back, "your store got new inventory and a renovated storefront. Your business is up 40%. And who controls the loan terms?" Frank shot back. "What happens when the other shoe drops?" The clerk's pencil scratched rapidly, recording every word. Years from now, these minutes would tell the story of how Cedar Grove faced its resurrection, with either courage or cowardice. Mrs. Henderson rose slowly, her arthritis making the movement difficult. "I was suspicious too at first. But look at what's happening. Children aren't going hungry at school anymore. The community center's giving our teenagers a future. My grocery store," her voice wavered, "I was 2 months from closing. Now I'm hiring staff for the first time in 5 years. The room shifted, tension crackling. Mike noticed Betty Martinez in the corner, taking notes with one hand while filming with her phone in the other. This would be tomorrow's headline, one way or another. "But who is she?" someone called from the back. "Why won't she show herself?" Mike's hand touched the silk scarf in his pocket. He knew he should speak, share what he and Betty had discovered, but something held him back. The time wasn't right. Principal Roberts stood next, straightening his tie. "I've reviewed every document related to the school donations. They're legitimate, transparent, and structured to be sustainable. This isn't a quick fix. It's a long-term investment in our children's future." "What about the technical training center?" another voice challenged. "Built right next to the old Mitchell building. Seems mighty convenient, doesn't it?" The mayor raised his hands for quiet. "Every project has been vetted by our lawyers and financial advisors. The funding is clean, the intentions clear. This person, whoever they are, is investing in our community's infrastructure, education, and future." "But why?" Frank persisted. "Nobody gives away millions without wanting something in return." "Maybe." Mike found himself standing, surprising. Even himself. Sometimes people give back because they understand what it means to lose everything. The room fell silent. Mike felt every eye turn to him, but he pressed on. "This town raised me. It raised most of us. When the Mitchell building burned, when the shopping center killed our downtown, when the recession hit, we survived because we helped each other. Maybe," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "maybe someone who understands that value of community is trying to help us do more than just survive." Emma, sitting beside him, squeezed his hand. She'd been quiet since he'd told her about the job offer, processing what it meant for their family. But now she stood too. "My dad helps people fix their cars even when they can't pay right away," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Mrs. Henderson lets families run tabs when times are tough. Mr. Pete teaches kids about engines for free. We all help each other, so maybe instead of questioning help when it comes, we should learn from it. Keep it going. The clerk's pencil paused, then continued with renewed purpose. The minutes would show how a 14-year-old girl reminded Cedar Grove of its own heart. The meeting continued for another hour, concerns raised and addressed, fears voiced and soothed. But something had shifted. The division in the room had blurred, replaced by cautious optimism. As people filed out into the evening air, Mike overheard snippets of conversation. Plans for new businesses, ideas for community projects, offers of help and collaboration. The mysterious benefactor had given them more than money. She'd given them permission to hope again. The clerk's final notation that evening read, "Meeting adjourned 9:17 p.m. Motion passed to proceed with all proposed developments. Community. A vote, 157 in favor, 23 opposed. Note, highest community participation in Cedar Grove history." Some would later say that this was the night Cedar Grove truly began to change. Not because of mysterious donations or ambitious projects, but because its people chose to believe in possibility again. The note appeared on Mike's windshield 3 days after the town hall meeting. The handwriting was elegant, familiar. "Mitchell Building, 8 p.m. Bring the scarf." Mike stood in the parking lot of Pete's Auto Shop, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. Around him, Cedar Grove hummed with renewed energy. Construction crews at the technical center, children's laughter from the playground, the constant flow of people in and out of the community center. He debated calling Betty, sharing this development with the reporter who'd helped uncover Elizabeth Mitchell's past. But something told him this needed to be a private conversation. At 7:55 p.m., Mike parked his truck outside the Mitchell Building. The structure stood dark against the twilight sky, its broken windows like hollow eyes watching his approach. The silk scarf felt heavy in his pocket. "I wasn't sure you'd come alone." The voice came from the shadows near the building's entrance. Elizabeth Mitchell stepped into the fading light, as elegant as the night he'd changed her tire. But now he saw what he'd missed before. The grief hiding behind her careful poise, the weight of a 30-year mission in her bearing. "You knew I would," Mike replied. "You've been watching long enough to know how I'd respond." She smiled, a flash of genuine warmth. "Yes, that night with the flat tire wasn't our first meeting, though you wouldn't remember the other time. You were just a boy, standing in line at the job fair with your father after the fire." The memory hit him. Holding his father's hand, watching proud men struggle to maintain dignity while asking for work. I remember the fear in his eyes. He'd worked at Mitchell Building for 20 years. 23, Elizabeth corrected softly. He was one of my father's first hires. She moved closer, her designer clothes incongruous against the building's decay. "Do you know what my father said the day he died? He called me from inside the burning building. Said he had to get the payroll records, had to make sure his people were taken care of." Mike reached for the scarf, but she held up a hand. "Keep it. Consider it a promise fulfilled. My father believed business wasn't just about profit. It was about responsibility to community. I've spent 30 years building the resources to honor that belief." "Why the other towns?" Mike asked. "Why not just focus on Cedar Grove?" "Because pain ripples," she said, touching the building's scarred wall. "When the Mitchell Building fell, it didn't just hurt Cedar Grove. Workers moved away, carrying their wounds to other communities. Companies saw an easy target, started targeting other small towns. The damage spread like circles in a pond." She turned to face him fully. "So the healing needs to spread too. Each town I help creates a network, strengthens the others. Cedar Grove isn't just being rebuilt, it's becoming part of something larger." "The technical training center," Mike realized. "It's not just for our town." Elizabeth nodded. "It'll partner with centers in other communities, share resources, create opportunities. The same with the other projects. Everything connects." A breeze stirred the evening air, carrying the scent of new-cut lumber from the construction site. Elizabeth pulled an envelope from her jacket. "The deed to the Mitchell building," she said, holding it out. "I'm donating it to the town, with one condition: it becomes a museum, not just of Cedar Grove's history, but of its resurrection, a reminder that communities can heal, that hope isn't naive." Mike took the envelope, understanding flowing through him. "That's why you worked through proxies, stayed hidden. This isn't about you getting credit. It's about the story Cedar Grove will tell itself," she agreed. "Not about a wealthy outsider saving them, but about a community choosing to save itself. The money, the opportunities, they're just tools. The real change comes from people believing in possibility again." She stepped back into the shadows. "My work here is almost done. The rest is up to Cedar Grove. Will we see you again? Perhaps. There are other towns waiting, other wounds to heal." She paused. "Take care of them, Mr. Thompson. Your students, your children, this community. Sometimes the greatest act of healing is teaching others how to rebuild." Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving Mike alone with the deed and the weight of her words. Above him, the Mitchell building stood silent, its darkness now seeming less like decay and more like potential waiting to be awakened. In his pocket, the silk scarf stirred, no longer a mystery, but a bridge between past and future, loss and redemption, wounds and healing. Emma found the drawing tucked into Sophie's backpack while checking for homework, a crayon masterpiece on wrinkled construction paper. Their family stood in front of what looked like the Mitchell building, but transformed. Windows glowed with warm yellow light, flowers bloomed along the walkway, and a figure in blue watched from the shadows with what seemed to be a smile. "Sophie!" Emma called upstairs. "Can you come here a minute?" Her little sister bounded down, still wearing the new dress they'd bought last weekend, the first new clothes any of them had gotten in months. "Did you find my picture? I made it." "In art class. It's for Miss Elizabeth." Emma sat on the couch, pulling Sophie into her lap. "Miss Elizabeth?" "The lady in the blue scarf. She visits me sometimes in my dreams. She says she's making things better like Daddy does with cars." From the kitchen came the sounds of Tyler explaining his latest coding project to their father. Words like algorithm and function mixed with the familiar clink of dishes being put away. Normal evening sounds, but somehow different now. Lighter, more hopeful. "What else happens in these dreams?" Emma asked carefully, studying her sisters, drawing more closely. The figure in blue had silver in her hair, just like the mysterious woman Dad had helped. "She shows me pictures of how things used to be. The big building where all the grown-ups worked, the park when it was new. She says we're going to make everything good again, but different good, better good." Sophie pointed to another figure in the drawing. "See, that's you, but you're smiling like you used to." Emma's throat tightened. She hadn't realized her sister had noticed the change in her, the weight of responsibility that had settled on her shoulders after Mom died. "Hey, artists!" Their dad appeared in the doorway, Tyler hovering behind him with a laptop. "What are we looking at?" Sophie bounced up, proud to show off her work. "It's the Mitchell building. Ms. Elizabeth is going to make it pretty again, and then people can learn about Cedar Grove's story there." Mike's expression flickered. Surprise, then understanding. He caught Emma's questioning look and nodded slightly. Later they would talk about his meeting with Elizabeth Mitchell, about the truth behind Sophie's dreams. But for now, he just scooped up his youngest daughter and studied her artwork. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Very accurate." He touched the figure in blue gently. "Maybe we should hang this up somewhere special." "The museum!" Sophie exclaimed. "When it's ready, Miss Elizabeth said it needs pictures that show hope." Tyler joined them, setting his laptop aside. "I could scan it, make it digital. We're learning about image processing in coding class. Maybe animate it, make the windows light up for real." "Speaking of class," Mike said, "don't you two have some homework to finish?" As the younger kids headed upstairs, Emma stayed behind, picking up the drawing again. "Dad, is it really over? All the mysterious stuff?" Mike sat beside her, and Emma leaned into his familiar warmth. the smell of motor oil and coffee that had always meant safety. "Not over," he said, "just changing, like us." Emma thought about the STEM program brochure hidden in her desk drawer, the one she'd been afraid to hope for. "I got the orientation package today for the summer program." Having second thoughts. "No, it's just—" She struggled to find the words. "What if you need me here, with Sophie and Tyler and—" "Emma." Her father's voice was gentle but firm. "You've carried so much, been so strong, but you're 14. It's time to let yourself be a kid again, to dream your own dreams, like you're doing. With the teaching job," he smiled. "Yeah, something like that." He picked up Sophie's drawing. "Look at this. Your sister drew you smiling. Maybe she sees something we've forgotten." Emma studied. The crayon version of herself standing tall and happy beside the restored building. "Do you think Miss Elizabeth knew? About all of us, I mean, about what we needed?" "I think," Mike said carefully, "she knew what it was like to lose a parent, to feel responsible too young. And I think she wanted to make sure history didn't repeat itself." From upstairs came the sound of Tyler explaining something to Sophie, their voices animated and light. The evening sun slanted through windows that no longer had to be covered to save on heating, casting warm patterns on the floor. On the coffee table, Emma's textbooks sat beside Tyler's coding manual and Sophie's art supplies. 3 different paths, all suddenly possible. "Dad," Emma picked up the drawing one last time. "I think I'm ready." To smile like that again. Mike hugged her close, and for the first time in 2 years, Emma felt truly, completely like a teenager. Not a substitute. Parent, not a caretaker, just a girl with dreams as bright as the future taking shape around them. The leather-bound journal arrived at Betty Martinez's office by courier, with a simple note attached. "The story you've been looking for. Publish when ready. E." Betty called Mike immediately. Within minutes, they sat in her small office at the Gazette. The journal opened between them. Its pages contained not just Elizabeth Mitchell's personal thoughts, but a detailed chronicle of her 30-year mission. "June 15th, 1992, Betty read aloud. "The fire took everything tonight. Not just the building, not just father, but hope itself. I watched from the police car as workers gathered outside, their faces lit by flames." Mr. Thompson held his son's hand. "Michael, the quiet boy who loves cars. Mrs. Henderson tried to organize food for the firefighters. Even in crisis, Cedar Grove takes care of its own. Father always said that. A business is a promise, Elizabeth, a promise to your workers, your community, your future. Tonight, as I watched that promise burn, I made one of my own." Mike's hand trembled as he turned the page. Elizabeth's elegant script filled every line, documenting years of careful planning, strategic decisions, and profound purpose. "September 3rd, 2002, he read. "Graduated business school today, top of my class. The professors call my focus on small-town economics quaint and unrealistic. They don't understand. I'm not building a business empire. I'm building a rescue mission. Every investment, every company acquired brings me closer to the resources needed." Cedar Grove was first to fall, but not the last. The pattern repeats. Predatory development, community dissolution, generational trauma, but patterns can be broken. Betty took notes rapidly, her reporter's instincts firing. "Look at this section. Details about every town she's helped. Millbrook, Sunset Valley, Pine Ridge. Each one chosen for specific reasons, each restoration planned years in advance." Mike found an entry from just months ago. "Watched Michael Thompson today, teaching a teenager about engines at Pete's shop. He has his father's kindness, that same belief in community that Cedar Grove always embodied. His daughter Emma carries too much weight, just as I did. His son Tyler dreams of computers like I dreamed of business school. And little Sophie, she sees me sometimes, I think. Children often do. They understand hope better than adults." The Technical Training Center. Plans are finalized. The Mitchell Building will become a museum, not of tragedy, but of resilience. Cedar Grove is ready. They don't need a savior. They just need someone to remind them of their own strength. Between entries were newspaper clippings, financial, reports and photographs, a methodical documentation of communities' healing. But it was the personal observations that caught Mike's attention, the way Elizabeth had noticed small details. Children sharing lunches when classmates couldn't afford them, mechanics doing free repairs for struggling families, teachers buying supplies with their own money. Here, Betty pointed to a recent entry. She explains the whole network she's building. The technical centers in each town will be connected, sharing resources and opportunities. The museums will form a historical trail, teaching visitors about community resilience. She's not just fixing individual towns, she's creating a model for sustainable revival. Mike found the final entry, dated just yesterday. The hardest part isn't giving money, it's giving it in a way that empowers rather than enables. Each donation had to feel earned, each opportunity had to arise naturally. Cedar Grove needed to believe in itself again, not in a mysterious benefactor. I watch Michael's children now. Emma planning for the STEM program, Tyler immersed in coding, Sophie drawing pictures of hope. They are Cedar Grove's future, just as I was once its past. The circle completes itself. Father, I understand now what you tried to teach me. A business isn't just ledgers and profits, it's people, connections, possibilities. The fire took you from me, but it gave me a purpose. Every town I help, every family that finds new hope, honors your legacy. Tomorrow I'll leave the journal for Betty Martinez. The story needs to be told, but not for my sake. Cedar Grove needs to understand its own power, its own capacity for renewal. They'll find this journal and see not just my journey, but their own strength reflected back at them. The Mitchell Building will rise again, not as a factory, but as a testament to resilience. And in its shadow, a new generation will learn what my father taught me, that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the strength of the bonds between people. Michael, Emma, Tyler, Sophie. They don't know it yet, but they're part of something larger than themselves. Every small act of kindness, every shared dream, every moment of hope adds another thread to the tapestry of renewal. The work isn't finished. There are other towns waiting, other wounds to heal, but Cedar Grove remembers now, and remembering is the first step toward becoming. Mike closed the journal gently. Outside Betty's office window, he could see the Mitchell Building silhouetted against the evening sky. Soon it would be transformed, its walls telling stories of loss and rebirth, its halls echoing with the footsteps of visitors learning about the power of community. But its greatest story wouldn't be about Elizabeth Mitchell or her mission. It would be about a town that learned to believe in itself again, one act of kindness at a time. The legal document landed on Mayor Wilson's desk like a bomb. Notice of injunction, Cedar Grove development projects. Mike watched the mayor's face darken as he scanned the dense legal text. Sunrise Development Corporation. The mayor. Read. They're claiming Elizabeth's projects violate their original purchase options on several key properties, including, he paused, looking up, including the Mitchell Building. Betty Martinez, who'd been summoned along with Mike, leaned forward. That's impossible. Elizabeth owns that building, has for 30 years, through a series of shell companies, the mayor corrected, which they're challenging as fraudulent. They're saying the original sale after the fire wasn't legal, that their contract had first rights of purchase. Mike felt the floor shift beneath him. Sunrise Development, the same company that had tried to force the buyout before the fire. The same ones who'd built the shopping center that gutted their downtown. They're after the technical training center too, the mayor continued, claiming it violates zoning restrictions they had written into property agreements years ago. They want all construction halted immediately. The autumn sun slanted through the office windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like scattered hopes. Outside, work continued on the training center, its walls rising toward completion. Children played on the new playground equipment. The community center hummed with activity. "How long have they been planning this?" Mike asked. "According to their filing, they've been gathering evidence since the first anonymous donations appeared. They've tracked Elizabeth's shell companies, documented every project. They're not just trying to stop the development, they're trying to unravel everything she's done." Betty was already typing on her laptop. Sunrise Development has a history of this. They target small towns, buy up distressed properties, then sit on them until they can flip them for massive profits. They've done it dozens of times, but why now? Mike fingered the silk scarf he still carried. Why wait until hope returned? The mayor's voice was bitter. Because that's when property values start rising, when investment becomes attractive again. They've been waiting for someone else to do the hard work of revival. The implications hit Mike like a physical blow. The job training program, Emma's STEM scholarship, Tyler's coding classes, Sophie's school lunches, all of it could unravel. Not just for his family, but for everyone in Cedar Grove. "We can fight this," Betty said firmly. "Elizabeth must have anticipated something like this. She's too smart not to have—" A knock interrupted her. Pete burst in, waving his own copy of the injunction. "They're putting up notices at the training center. Construction crews are already pulling out." The mayor slumped in his chair. "They filed in multiple jurisdictions. Even if we fight it, they can tie everything up in court for years." Mike stared out the window at his town, his transforming, healing, hoping town. He thought of Elizabeth's journal, her careful plans, her 30-year mission of restoration. "What does Elizabeth say about this?" "That's just it," the mayor replied. "We can't reach her. All the usual channels of communication have gone dark." Silence filled the office, heavy with the weight of threatened dreams. Then Mike felt something, a slight movement in his pocket. The silk scarf seemed to shift on its own, its pattern of keys and compass roses catching the light. "Maybe," he said slowly. "That's the point." They all turned to look at him. Elizabeth's journal said Cedar Grove needed to believe in itself again, not in a mysterious benefactor. Maybe— He pulled out the scarf, studying its intricate pattern. "Maybe this is the real test. Not what she could do for us, but what we can do for ourselves." Betty's eyes lit up with understanding. The museum archives, all those records of how Cedar Grove handled past crises, the community responses, the way people came together. "We've done it before," Mike said. "After the fire, after the factory closures, after every setback. We survived because we stood together." Pete straightened up. "The Auto Shop Association would back us, and I know contractors who'd work pro bono to keep construction going. The Gazette could rally public support," Betty added, "and I have contacts at other papers in the towns Elizabeth helped. If this is happening here, it could be happening everywhere," the mayor finished. "All the communities in her network facing the same threat." Mike touched the scarf one last time, then carefully folded it and placed it on the mayor's desk. "Then maybe that's the real network we need to build. Not just sharing resources and opportunities, but standing together against anyone who tries to break us again." Outside, the construction crews were gathering their tools, preparing to shut down under the injunction. But through the window, Mike could see people beginning to gather. Parents from the playground, teenagers from the community center, workers from downtown shops. Cedar Grove wasn't ready to let go of hope. Not this time. The petition started with a single sheet of paper on Mrs. Henderson's grocery store counter. "We, the undersigned, stand with Cedar Grove." Within hours, she had to start a second page. By nightfall, there were 15. Mike watched names fill the pages throughout the day. Teachers who'd seen their students thrive with new resources, parents whose children could finally eat lunch without shame, Teenagers who'd found purpose in coding classes, seniors who'd rediscovered community at the renovated center. Each signature told a story of transformation. "Look at this," Betty said, spreading the growing stack of papers across a table at the community center. "Over 2,000 signatures already. That's almost half the town." But it wasn't just signatures. Beside each name were pledges, contractors offering free labor, lawyers promising pro bono services, business owners volunteering resources. The Auto Shop Association had already raised a legal defense fund. The senior center was organizing a letter-writing campaign to state officials. "Mrs. Wilson's pizza place is feeding the construction crews for free," Emma reported, bringing in another sheet of signatures. "They're staying on site even though they're not getting paid. Tyler's helping set up a website to coordinate volunteers." Mike watched his daughter move through the crowd with newfound confidence. The weight of premature responsibility had lifted from her shoulders, replaced by purposeful energy. She was organizing her peers, using her natural leadership abilities. Not out of necessity, but choice. "Dad," Tyler burst in, laptop under his arm. "We did it. The coding class wrote a program to connect all the towns in Elizabeth's network. We're getting responses already. Pine Ridge, Millbrook, Sunset Valley. They're all facing the same legal challenges." The community center's main room had become command central. Tables were covered with laptops, legal documents, and action plans. Frank Davidson from the hardware store was coordinating supply donations. Principal Roberts had brought the school's civics classes to learn about community activism firsthand. "Look at this," Betty called everyone's attention to her screen. "Sunrise Development stock is taking a hit. Our story's gone viral. People are sharing their tactics, their history of community destruction. Major news outlets are picking it up. It's not just about Cedar Grove anymore," Pete added. "Other towns are coming forward with similar stories. Predatory developers, destroyed communities." Elizabeth's network wasn't just about revival. It was about protection. Mike picked up one of the petition sheets, reading the names. Each signature represented someone choosing hope over fear, community over surrender. The mayor had been skeptical about the petition's legal weight, but Mike understood now. This wasn't about legal power. It was about showing Cedar Grove's heart. Sophie tugged at his sleeve, holding up her latest drawing. She'd sketched the Mitchell building again, but this time the figure in blue wasn't alone. Hundreds of tiny figures surrounded her. Their stick figure, hands linked together. "Ms. Elizabeth isn't gone," Sophie said with certainty. "She's watching. She wanted to see if we remembered." "Remembered what, sweetheart?" "How to help each other, like before the fire." A commotion at the door drew their attention. Mrs. Henderson entered, leaning on her cane, but standing straight with pride. Behind her came a procession of Cedar Grove's oldest residents, each carrying something: faded photographs, old documents, yellowed newspapers. "Found these in our attics," Mrs. Henderson announced. "Proof that Sunrise's claims about property rights are lies. They didn't have first rights to anything. The Mitchell building was sold at public auction. We all witnessed it. And those zoning restrictions they're claiming, the town council voted them down in '91. We have the minutes to prove it." The room erupted in activity. Betty began scanning. Documents. Law students from the community college pored over old records. Tyler and his coding friends started digitizing everything, creating a searchable database. "There's more," Mrs. Henderson continued. "We've been calling everyone who worked at the Mitchell building. They're coming forward, ready to testify about what really happened before the fire, about Sunrise's pressure tactics, their threats." Mike watched it all unfold, young and old working together, skills and resources being shared, hope transforming into action. This wasn't just about saving Elizabeth's projects anymore. It was about Cedar Grove rediscovering its own power. The petition sheets kept filling, each name a thread in a tapestry of resistance. But the real strength wasn't in the signatures. It was in the conversations happening around the tables, the connections being forged, the community healing itself. Outside, the construction crews worked on, protected now by a human chain of volunteers. The technical training center rose steadily, each brick a defiance of those who thought Cedar Grove could be broken again. And somewhere Mike believed Elizabeth. Mitchell was watching, not to rescue them this time, but to witness Cedar Grove rescue itself. The new town charter lay open on the mayor's desk, its fresh ink still drying. Through the window behind him, the technical training center stood complete, its windows gleaming in the morning sun. The Mitchell building beside it was already undergoing restoration, scaffolding wreathing its walls like a promise of rebirth. Motion carries unanimously, Mayor Wilson announced, his voice carrying through the packed town hall. The Cedar Grove Community Protection Act is now law. The room erupted in cheers. Mike felt Emma squeeze his hand as Tyler pumped his fist in triumph. Sophie, perched on Pete's shoulders, clapped with unrestrained joy. Betty Martinez was already typing furiously on her laptop, documenting the historic moment. The headlines would tell part of the story. Sunrise Development withdraws, legal challenge. Cedar Grove passes groundbreaking community protection law. Small town's victory inspires national movement. But the real story was in the details of the charter itself. Every word had been crafted by the community, drawing on painful lessons from the past and hard-won wisdom from the present. No corporation could ever again use predatory tactics to destroy Cedar Grove's heart. Let's review the key provisions, the mayor continued, his voice steady with pride. First, all development projects must include community benefit agreements, legally binding commitments to provide lasting value to Cedar Grove. Mike thought of Elizabeth's careful planning, how she'd built exactly these kinds of protections into every project. She'd shown them the way, trusting they'd understand when the time came. Second, historic properties like the Mitchell Building are protected under a community trust, controlled by a board of local residents. Third, the Technical Training Center and its affiliated programs are established as permanent community resources with guaranteed funding through a combination of business partnerships and local investment. The victory hadn't come easily. For weeks, Cedar Grove had fought back against Sunrise's legal assault, but their strength hadn't come from money or political power. It had come from unity, from the thousands of documented stories showing how predatory development had hurt communities across the country. When Pine Ridge, Millbrook, and the other towns in Elizabeth's network joined the fight, sharing their own experiences and legal strategies, the tide had turned. Sunrise's stock plummeted as their tactics were exposed. Major investors pulled out, unwilling to be associated with community destruction. Finally, the mayor said, the charter establishes the Cedar Grove Community Development Fund, ensuring that future growth serves the entire town, not just outside. Interests? Mrs. Henderson stood up slowly, leaning on her cane. And the first contribution to that fund? The mayor smiled. Just arrived this morning. An anonymous donation matching every dollar raised by the community during our legal fight. Along with this note, he held up a familiar piece of cream-colored stationery. Mike recognized the elegant handwriting immediately. Cedar Grove has reminded us all that true wealth lies not in property values or profit margins, but in the bonds between people. You've proven what my father always believed, that a community's strength comes from its heart, not its wallet. The Mitchell Building's restoration will tell this story, not just of one town's revival, but of all the communities that refuse to be broken. P.S. Sophie's artwork will have a special place in the museum. Children often see truth more clearly than adults. Sophie beamed from her perch on Pete's shoulders, while Tyler already had his laptop out, probably adding another chapter to the website he'd created, documenting Cedar Grove's transformation. Emma leaned against Mike's shoulder, Did you ever think that night when you stopped to help change a tire that it would lead to all this? Mike shook his head. But maybe that's the point. We never know which act of kindness will change everything. The council chamber slowly emptied as people headed to the community-wide celebration at the Technical Training Center. But Mike lingered, watching sunlight play across the charter's pages. The document wasn't just a set of laws. It was a testament to what Cedar Grove had become: stronger, wiser, more united. Elizabeth's investment hadn't just been in buildings and programs. She'd invested in the community's spirit, trusting they would reclaim their power when the time came. Outside, he could hear music starting up, smell barbecue smoke from Pete's new grill. The sounds of children playing mingled with adult laughter. Cedar Grove was celebrating not just a legal victory, but a rediscovery of itself. The silk scarf still hung from his truck's mirror, its pattern of keys and compass roses now seeming less like a mystery and more like a map, not to hidden treasures, but to the wealth that had been within Cedar Grove all along. The time capsule gleamed in the autumn sunlight, its polished surface reflecting the crowd gathered for the Mitchell Building Museum's grand opening. Inside, carefully curated items told the story of Cedar Grove's journey. The original, extra edition of the Gazette, Emma's journal entries, Sophie's drawings, Tyler's website code printed on archival paper, and countless other artifacts of transformation. Today, Mike addressed the assembled crowd from the museum's front steps. We're not just opening a building or burying a time capsule. We're preserving a promise for future generations. 6 months had passed since the victory over Sunrise Development. The Technical Training Center was running at full capacity, with a waiting list for new programs. Downtown storefronts gleamed with fresh paint and new businesses. But the real changes went deeper than mere appearances. Emma stood beside her father now, poised and confident in her new role as student body president. Her summer STEM program had ignited a passion for engineering, and she'd already started mentoring younger students. Tyler had launched a coding club that connected kids from all the towns in Elizabeth's network, while Sophie's art hung proudly in the museum's children's wing. When we open this capsule in 50 years, Mike continued, our grandchildren will learn about more than just economic revival. They'll learn how a community rediscovered its heart. The items went in one by one, each telling part of the story. Mrs. Henderson contributed her original petition sheets, now laminated for preservation. Pete added a wrench from his first automotive class at the training center. Betty Martinez included a bound collection of her articles documenting the transformation, but the most powerful items were the personal ones. Thank you letters from families whose lives had changed, photographs of community celebrations, drawings from children imagining their town's future. Each artifact captured not just events, but feelings, hope, determination, unity. Some of you may notice, Mike said, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd, that we've left space in the capsule. Because Cedar Grove's story isn't finished. Each generation will face its own challenges, find its own ways to keep our community strong. He held up the silk scarf, the last item to be added. This reminds us that sometimes the greatest acts of kindness come from unexpected places, but more importantly, it reminds us that we have the power to be that kindness for others. The scarf went in, its pattern of keys and compass roses catching the light one last time. As the capsule was sealed, Mike spotted movement at the edge of the crowd. A figure in elegant clothes stood in the shadow of an oak tree, silver hair gleaming. Elizabeth Mitchell didn't step forward or draw attention to herself. She simply watched, a quiet smile playing at her lips. The museum doors opened to reveal exhibits that told Cedar Grove's story. The Mitchell Building's early days, the fire, the long years of struggle, and finally, revival. But it wasn't just a local story anymore. An entire wing was dedicated to the network of communities that had faced similar challenges and found similar strength. Tyler led tours of the technology exhibits, explaining how small towns were using digital connections to support each other. Emma showed visitors the engineering displays, where students' projects demonstrated the future they were building. Sophie's art class had created a mural of interlinked hands, representing the connections between communities. The real exhibits, Mike told the crowd, are outside these walls. They're in the friendships forged during our hardest moments. They're in the businesses that choose community over profit. They're in every act of kindness that ripples outward, touching lives we may never see. As the ceremony ended and people moved inside to explore the museum, Mike watched his children. Emma was already organizing the next student council project. Tyler had his laptop out, probably adding today's events to his digital archive. Sophie was drawing again, her pictures now filled with joy rather than just hope. The time capsule sat, ready to be sealed in its place of honor, a testament to how far they'd come and a promise to those who would follow. Its contents would show future generations that revival wasn't just about buildings or money. It was about people choosing to believe in each other. And somewhere in the crowd, a woman in a designer dress slipped away quietly, her work here, complete. But her legacy lived on in every signature on those petitions, every student in the training center, every small act of kindness that proved Cedar Grove had not just survived, but learned to thrive. The autumn breeze carried the sound of laughter and conversation, the music of a community alive with purpose. Above them, the Mitchell building stood restored, its windows no longer dark with memory, but bright with promise. 1 year later, Mike sat in his office at the Technical Training Center, surrounded by thank-you letters that had arrived from across the country. Each envelope contained stories of transformation, not just from Cedar Grove, but from communities touched by the ripples of their revival. "Dear Mr. Thompson," one letter began, "I never thought I'd see my hometown come alive again. But after reading about Cedar Grove, we started our own community protection program. The empty storefronts are filling up. People are coming home." Another, "Your story inspired our town to fight back against predatory development. We're not just surviving anymore, we're thriving. Thank you for showing us it was possible." The letters covered his bulletin board, each one a testament to hope's contagious nature. But his favorites were closer to home. Emma's acceptance, letter to the engineering summer program, where she'd now be a junior counselor, Tyler's coding competition awards, Sophie's art contest ribbons. A knock at his door interrupted his reflections. "Dad, you're going to be late for the ceremony." Emma stood in the doorway, looking so much like her mother it made his heart ache. But the sadness was gentler now, softened by the joy of watching his daughter become herself again. "Just finishing up some paperwork," he said, gathering his things. "How's the new mentoring program going?" "Amazing. We've got 30 middle school girls signed up for STEM workshops. And guess what? 3 other towns in the network want to copy our model." They walked together through the training center's halls, passing classrooms filled with students learning everything from automotive repair to computer programming. Pete's voice carried from the garage bay, explaining fuel injection systems. To a rapt audience, outside Cedar Grove basked in spring sunshine. The community center bustled with activity. Mrs. Henderson's grocery store had expanded, adding a cafe where teenagers gathered after school. The downtown streets hummed with life and purpose. The ceremony was being held in the Mitchell Building's museum wing. As Mike entered, he saw familiar faces from every chapter of their journey. Betty Martinez, who'd won a national award for her coverage of small-town revival. Frank Davidson, whose hardware store now anchored a thriving business district. Principal Roberts, whose school had become a model for community integration. But it was the new faces that truly told the story of Cedar Grove's transformation. Young families moved by the promise of opportunity, entrepreneurs drawn by the spirit of innovation, students coming from other towns to learn and grow. Tyler waved from his spot by the technology display, where he was showing visitors the network of connected communities he'd helped build. Sophie's latest mural decorated the wall behind him, a tapestry of interwoven stories told in vibrant colors. Before we begin, Mayor Wilson addressed the gathered crowd, I'd like to read one more letter. This arrived this morning. Mike recognized the cream-colored stationery, the elegant handwriting. Dear Cedar Grove, 1 year ago you proved that a community's strength lies not in its buildings or bank accounts, but in its people's hearts. Your revival has inspired others to reclaim their own power, to remember that true wealth grows through connection and care. The network you've helped build now spans 27 towns, each one learning from your example. But more importantly, each one adding its own wisdom to the growing story of community resilience. My father believed that business should serve people, not profit from their struggles. You've shown how that principle can transform not just one town, but an entire movement. The Mitchell Building stands restored, but its greatest restoration isn't in its walls. It's in the spirit of the people who gather within them, who continue to prove that kindness, when woven into the fabric of community, creates a tapestry strong enough to withstand any storm. Keep building, keep believing, keep showing others the way. With gratitude and pride, Elizabeth Mitchell. Mike felt Emma's hand slip into his as Sophie climbed into his lap. Tyler leaned against his chair, momentarily still. Together, they watched their community celebrate not just what they'd overcome, but what they'd become. Through the museum's windows, he could see the technical training center where he'd teach tomorrow's class. Beyond it, the town stretched out like a promise kept, each building and business a testament to renewed hope. The silk scarf was retired now, preserved in a museum display case. But its pattern of keys and compass roses had become something larger, a reminder that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with a simple act of kindness on a rainy night. And somewhere out there, Mike knew Elizabeth Mitchell was helping another town find its way back to life. But Cedar Grove no longer needed a mysterious benefactor. They had found something more valuable than money, the unshakable knowledge that together they could face any challenge, heal any wound, build any future they dared to imagine. The thank you letters would keep coming, each one a thread in an ever-expanding tapestry of revival. But the real gratitude lived in the daily life of Cedar Grove, in every open door, every shared smile, every moment of grace between neighbors who had remembered how to believe in each other again.